Joining us. Yeah, we already have quite a few people. Nice.
Okay. We have about, what, 21?
Yes. So
Good
welcome
evening,
everybody.
everyone. Go ahead, Casper. Take it away.
So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to start in a couple of minutes at 6:03. So my name is Casper. I'm joined with Simone. We have a special guest here for you tonight. In the meantime, while we're waiting to start, you're welcome to type in your locations where you're tuning in from in the chat. And Larry, I believe you're joining us from Miami, right?
Correct. I'm in Miami, Florida.
Nice.
Yes.
So nice.
Could be worse. Yes.
Mm,
Somebody's tuning in
Casper.
from Flushing. That's good. Yeah, Larry, last Sunday I was on the train. I was going to Jackson Heights, and there was
Oh,
a
yeah.
holiday train, a special holiday train, like from the 1930s. So I was really lucky. I
Wow.
just happened to go on it. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, how cool is that? I wish I could do that. They're so beautiful when I see them in movies.
Was
Yeah,
that
some people
something you
even dressed.
planned or
No,
surprise?
I was going to work at Jackson Heights, and I just saw the train. So I was like, okay, let me go on for a few stops. And it was really nice. There was like these fans on the ceiling, and some people even dressed up in like 1930s clothing. So it was a
Wow.
real
Oh my,
pleasure.
oh,
I didn't
that's
know
so
Everybody
they
was on their
cool.
phones taking pictures. If
I
you go
didn't
on
know
the
they did
website,
that.
they have
Yeah.
like some events scheduled with the old trains. It was really nice. I was just lucky.
Good for them to do that. That's so cool.
I
Yeah.
just New York is so exciting because you can always run into really fun things.
So now it's 6:03, and we are so excited and thrilled to start our program. Should we start off?
Yes, let's start.
Okay, great. So, hello, and welcome everyone to another wonderful edition. And it's a repeat edition of today's Authors Talk. And this time, without any hiccups, without any little flaws, we are once again joined by Lawrence Samuel. And Lawrence, as you all know, is the author of the book Queens, A History of the Most Diverse Place on Earth. But before we jump into the book, and I was so excited I didn't even introduce myself. I am Simone Wellington, specialist at the Far Rockaway Library and season co-host for the Authors Talk. I would just get into some announcements before we get into our interview. So join us in December for Queen's Public Library's annual It's Time for Kind celebration. This year's theme, Be Kind to Your Mind, is a call to practice self-care. Enjoy our special programs, explore our recommended books, pick up a self-care activity journal at your local library, and much more. Visit queenslib.org/ITFK 2025 to learn more. QBL wishes you and your loved ones a very happy holiday. Throughout the season, we'll be offering a joyful and vibrant selection of all ages books, movies, music, crafts, concerts, programs, and more. Visit queenslibrary.org to get all the details about holiday fun at the library. Help feed your fellow New Yorkers in need. Queen's Public Library, in partnership with City Harvest, will be collecting canned goods at all open QPL locations starting December 8th. So please visit queenslibrary.org to learn more about our winter food drive. Librarians are for everyone. Thanks to our generous supporters, QPL remains a place to learn, grow, and belong. Now, through December 31st, your gift to Queen's Public Library Foundation will have double the impact for our vital programs and services, thanks to our matching gift challenge. You can learn more and donate today at qplf.org/match25. Thank you, and take it away, Casper.
Thank you so much, Simone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're so excited to have a special speaker who's back with us today. We're going to have a really great program. And our special speaker, if you haven't guessed already, is Larry Samuel, who is a Miami and New York City-based independent scholar who holds a PhD in American Studies. He is the author of many books, including The End of Innocence, the 1964 to 1965 New York World's Fair, Tudor City, Manhattan's Historic Residential Enclave, and Making Long Island a History of Growth and the American Dream. But today, Larry's going to talk about a special book. So, Larry, I'll let you take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Casper, and thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. Everything is working tonight. First off, full disclosure, I didn't grow up in Queens. I grew up right on the border of Nassau County in the Five Towns. But I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Queens, mostly because I did go to the 1964-65 World's Fair as a child, and that really made a huge imprint on my life, actually. So in terms of how the book came to be, there are many books about Queens, about particular neighborhoods of Queens, especially, but I felt there really wasn't a book that told the story in the way that I wanted to tell it. So that is how this book came to be. So I've got a PowerPoint. I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to follow the book's outline very closely, which has an introduction. And then I broke the book out into 5 different eras, basically, about 20 or 25-year eras, which I think tell the history well chronologically. Okay, so we're going to follow this outline tonight. So first off, the purpose of the book was to chart the residential development of the borough. The last few books I've written have been all about real estate, basically, because I think property, the buying and selling of property, is really the best way to understand any place and to understand the people that live there. And with some of my projects, the hook, if you want to call it, the angle isn't quite clear until I write the whole book. But this immediately became very clear that the most remarkable aspect of Queens is its unmatched diversity. And so I really wanted to tell that story about how that happened over the past century, okay, since the end of World War I, which is basically 100 years. Okay, so my question, I always go into a project with a big question that I try to answer. And for this project, it was how and why did Queens transform from a quasi-suburb of Manhattan for the white upper middle class to what is widely considered the most diverse place in the country, if not the world? As you can see, the subtitle is, I make the bold claim that it is the world's most diverse place on earth. I have some evidence to support that claim. First off, from the 1990 census, Queens was shown definitively to be the most diverse county in the United States based on race and ethnicity. And Elmhurst, in particular, was designated the most diverse community in the entire country. So first off, we have statistics backing that up. Other evidence, the National Geographic magazine, they have a project called the Genographic Project, and they did this crazy thing, this wonderful thing, where they went into different neighborhoods in Queens and actually other boroughs, and they do DNA testing on basically on people on the street, and they found that New York City, and particularly Astoria, was a, quote, microcosm of the world, meaning there was more DNA from more different places around the world than anywhere else that they had found in the world, which is pretty incredible. And another piece of evidence is that there are more languages in Queens spoken than anywhere else on the planet. That is according to the Endangered Language Alliance. There's something like 800 languages spoken in your borough, which is amazing. Okay. My secondary purpose is to give Queens the respect it really deserves. Okay. It's long been considered sort of the Rodney Dangerfield of New York City, and the epitome of bridge and tunnel culture for a number of different reasons. First off, The Great Gatsby from 1925, Fitzgerald. You are home to what was the Valley of Ashes in that book. I'm gonna speak to that in a bit. I think Archie Bunker did some reinforcement of that image in All in the Family. And to this day, I lived in Manhattan, and I would encounter people who only looked at Queens as a place to either to go to one of the two airports or maybe to get buried there, because there are so many cemeteries, which I'm going to talk about in just a second. There's more than 5 million people buried in Queens, way more people, dead people, than alive people actually in Queens. And my own people are in Elmhurst, so maybe I will become a citizen of Queens one day. I mentioned a long list of different groups. I'm not going to go through them. I'm sorry if I've left anybody out here, but you can see from Afghans to Welsh are listed in my book and mentioned. As well are many different neighborhoods. And in my index, I took the time to sort of cross index the ethnicities with the neighborhoods to really document who lives where, because I felt that was very important. Okay, so quite a few of the books that I've written about Queens are pre-20th century, okay, 18th and 19th century, and it's quite documented. But I'm just going to briefly go over about 200 years to catch up to the 20th century. Of course, it was home to Native Americans for centuries before Europeans came, which happened in the early 17th century. So that was in the 1600s when they first arrived. They brought with them smallpox in 1658. It killed 2/3 of the native population. Thank you very much. Queens County was officially established in 1683. You may know this. It's named after the Queen of England. Her name was Catherine of Braganza. Queens at that time was 3 times what it is today. So it extended way into Nassau County at the time. Okay, it was much bigger, but it was home to only 93 families. So you can see how rural the area was. And it played a very active role in the Revolutionary War. There's a couple of good books purely about that, so I'm not going to take you through that. Okay, so through the 18th and early 19th century, Queens is basically very rural, it's agricultural, it's dotted with small towns, but very gradually more roads are being built. Ferries are a way to get to Queens from the other parts of New York City. And those help farmers take the produce to market. Basically, there's vegetables and flowers. Queens is very much the flower market of New York City at this time. And so they are happy to see these modes of transportation. The Long Island Railroad arrives in 1836, way back then into Jamaica, which of course changes things. And by the late 19th century, we're seeing Queens become more urbanized. Factories are coming up because the land is cheap there. There are wide open spaces for cemeteries, which again, I'm going to talk about in a minute. And really the first wave of immigrants, the first wave of diversity are Irish and Germans. They're coming over in the late 19th century. Here is an image of Rockaway Beach from the turn of the 20th century, and then Bayside on your right. So really into the 20th century, you can see how pastoral it was, you know, before World War I, when everything changes. This is the cemetery area, one of the cemeteries. That's Mount Judah on the left, and a couple of other cemeteries. You can see how much land these cemeteries take up. Now, this all happened with what was called the Rural Cemetery Act in 1847. The city wanted to move cemeteries out of Manhattan. They were little churchyard cemeteries. So they looked to the suburbs, and Queens was considered actually a suburb at the time. And so a lot of cemeteries were built. There's a couple of dozen today, over 5,000 acres. And that's just a little part of Calvary Cemetery on the right. Okay, so beginning in the 20th century, basically, we have, of course, 1898 when Queens becomes part of New York City. It's looked to as a suburb. I know that's surprising today, but if you go back into the research, it's referred to as a suburb. And the transportation grid transforms pretty quickly. We have in 1909 the Queensboro Bridge built and the Penn tunnels at the same time, which literally link Queens to Manhattan. Before, you basically had to take a ferry there. So this changes everything. The LIRR added a Kew Garden stop in 1912, so that helps build up that community. We have Queens Boulevard opening in 1914, the number 7 train, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, in 1917, and bus service in 1920. Now, real estate developers can see what's going on here. They recognize this could mean a lot of money to them. So they are interested in developing Queens. We're seeing Jews come from the Lower East Side to Forest Hills and Corona. A couple of synagogues open up. World War I stops everything because no construction can happen during a world war. Okay, so everything is stopped for a few years, but that all changes beginning in 1920. Okay, that is the Queensboro Bridge, and you can see a parade. This was a very big deal in 1909 when this happened. And here we go. Okay, so Queens, as we know it today, really starts to stay shape after World War I ends. There's still a lot of farmland, and developers, again, see this as a great place to build houses and apartment buildings for what is a rapidly expanding managerial class. We're seeing the Garden City concept of development pioneered in Forest Hills Gardens, Sunnyside Gardens, Jackson Heights. These are offering bigger apartments, greener spaces than what you can get for your money in Manhattan. So a lot of business folks are very attracted to this. They're raising families at this point, and it's a relatively short commute. However, there are covenants in place for all of these developments, which bar African Americans, Jews, and immigrants who are almost all Catholic at this point. So they are not allowed to live in any of these neighborhoods at this point. This is a couple of images of the very beautiful and very restricted Forest Hills Gardens. You can see how beautiful it was. And we have the building of what is really the first dedicated tennis stadium in the United States. That's an ad from 1922 on your left, showing the stadium to be. And then in 1924, on the right, you're seeing the women's championship. So they're playing already on the courts. I was lucky enough to play there. I played tennis on my high school team. And we played a couple of teams there, which was, of course, thrilling. I got to play with a pro once who was practicing, a guy named Vitas Gerulaitis, who was from Queens, as is John McEnroe. So this was very exciting. This was home to the U.S. Open until 1977 when they moved it to Flushing. So I would go as a kid to see the U.S. Open. I met Arthur Ashe there. It was very exciting times for me. Okay, so here is a map of both Queens and Brooklyn. You can see those are subway and bus and trolley lines. So by 1924, when this map was produced, you can see how developed really the transportation grid is by the 1920s. And on the right, that is Ward 1, which is Long Island City. Probably still is Ward 1. And they broke up each neighborhood into voting districts. Okay, they wanted to know who was voting where all the way back then. The city did that starting even before the United States was a country. They were starting to do that. So you can see that Long Island City was broken up into 39 different zones or districts. Okay, while all of this is happening, thousands of African Americans are coming to Queens from Harlem and the Bronx. Why? A lot of them came up from the Great Migration from the South, and those apartments in Harlem and Bronx are very crowded. landlords are taking advantage and overpricing them. There already was a Black community in Queens, but this adds population quite a bit. And we have to remember that Queens as a borough was very highly segregated. The whole United States was basically between the world wars through the 20s and 30s. Jamaica and Corona emerge as the major Black communities in Queens. Sparks would often fly if a Black family would try to move into a predominantly white neighborhood. And we have to remember that the KKK was still a presence through the 1920s and into the 1930s. And there was some activity, shall we call it, by the KKK during these years. That is Jamaica High School, brand new. It was built in 1927 as more people came to Queens. It was the biggest high school in the country, believe it or not. A lot of Black students attended there, and there were actually a number of Black teachers who taught there. And that is the First Baptist Congregation Church, I believe, in Corona, and that was the hub, one of the hubs of the Corona Black community in the 20s and 30s. So we have home ownership increasing dramatically as the population increases in the borough. Through the Roaring 20s, the economy is doing very well. The stock market is surging. A lot of people are taking the gains that they made from the stock market and put it into real estate. You can get a house for $5,000 or $10,000 at this time, and so people are trying to become owners and stop renting. And African Americans are doing this too. They're benefiting from the economy. They're getting jobs in places that they weren't before World War I. So they are buying property in Jamaica and Corona, and there's an entire real estate community dedicated to African Americans. It sometimes overlaps with the white real estate audience, but it's mostly Black only at this point. We have public housing being built in the late 30s for the Depression for lower income folks. The New York City Housing Authority builds the Queensbridge Housing Project in Long Island. It opens up in 1939. And then, of course, we have the world literally coming to the borough as war breaks out in Europe in 1939. With the 1940 New York World's Fair in Flushing Meadows. And I would bet there's probably a couple of folks out there who I'm speaking to who went to that fair, which was very beloved. Here we have new houses coming up in Glendale on your left in 1926. And those are recently built houses in Astoria in 1930, which are very classic Queens sort of housing, as you know. Okay, that is the Queens Bridge Housing Project. It was a huge project. There were 29 buildings, each 6 stories. The elevators only stopped on every other floor, which was probably inconvenient if you were on a floor that didn't have an elevator. A lot of folks come out of there who became rappers and NBA stars. Nas came out of the Queensbridge project rather famously. And there you can see one of the kitchens. And rent at the time was $22.50 a month. So a good deal. I mentioned the 39 World's Fair. There's the Triathlon and Perisphere, very futuristic, looking at the world of tomorrow. And Art Deco was all the rage, and we have the very Art Deco Ford building there on your right. Okay, so we're into the 1940s. We have another huge shift in transportation that links Queens to Manhattan with the Queens Midtown Tunnel. It makes Queens much commuter friendly, of course. And it's only about a 20-minute drive now between much of Queens and Manhattan, which is very attractive to people in terms of relocating there. And actually, there are more new homes built in Queens in 1940 than in any other county in the United States. So Queens is going crazy at this point. But again, just like in World War I, there's no new construction. That the same materials that are used for housing are the same materials used for the military. So they take all of the metal and wood and all that stuff. So very little is built during the war years. However, we can see the diversity becoming visible during the war years. African Americans and white ethnics are demonstrating their loyalty both at home in Queens and overseas if they've joined the service. There you can see high school students from Flushing High School, actually, as part of their PE class now, they are doing commando training. That's 1944. And there on your right, that is a victory garden in Forest Hills. People were growing their own fruits and vegetables to help the country's food supply at the time. We're seeing large numbers of the white middle class move into Queens right after the war. They're seeing it as a more affordable and commuter-friendly alternative to Long Island, which is also booming at the time, Westchester, New Jersey, and Connecticut. What is being built are sizable garden apartments, single-family houses, and high-rises. Much of that open land is filling up at this point. And we're seeing a next level of diversity accelerate through the late 40s and 1950s. We have West Indians arriving, Chinese, and more Germans immigrate to Queens as a result of all the turmoil in their country from World War II. And we have some Japanese immigrants arriving in the late 1950s. Okay, here we have a map of Queens detailing every street, believe it or not, and the city assigned numbers to all the streets and all the houses. And there on your right is another map of Queens with reveals how much land is cemeteries. If you see sort of an open space there on your upper left or to the right or below, those are cemeteries. So they take up enormous portion of the borough. Early 60s, I think, is a golden age for Queens, both in terms of architecture and transportation. We have new terminals being built at Idlewild Airport, which is going to be soon named Kennedy Airport. We, of course, have the 64-65 World's Fair on the same site where the 39 and 40 World's Fair was held. And Robert Moses is the president of that fair. And of course, he loved roads, liked roads more than people, actually. And he uses the fair. He didn't really care about the fair much at all, actually. He just wanted it so that he could build his highways. And that's exactly what he does. He expands the Van Wyck. He widens the Grand Central and the Whitestone, and he rebuilds basically Northern Boulevard. That was his real love. Okay, so there we have the very modernist terminal at Idlewild, built by Kahn and Jacobs. And there, of course, is Eero Saarinen's fabulous TWA terminal, which I guess now is a restaurant, which I have yet to go to. And those are being built here in 1961. And there, of course, is the Unisphere, which was the featured architectural building. Every fair has one. And that was the biggest representation of Earth at the time. It was 12 stories. It was built by U.S. Steel. It's still there, of course. It was always meant to be permanent, unlike almost everything else at the fair. And when I was there last summer, the fountains were gone. I guess they're rebuilding those or doing something with them. They weren't working. It wasn't nearly as pretty as this, but this is just gorgeous. You can see the United States Pavilion up on your left, upper left, and of course, the very brand new Shea Stadium as well back there. Okay, so here I am at the World's Fair. I'm the little one in front with my dad and my two brothers. We left my little brother at home, who was very upset, I remember. And there, of course, we are again with my mom. And I love this image on the right because my brother Artie, my older brother, who's standing next to my mom there, he is so despondent. I think it was because my mom didn't let him have a second Belgian waffle, which was, the most fabulous thing at the World's Fair. Whoever went to it would remember that. Okay, so this is part of the New York State Pavilion. We have the towers on the left featured prominently in the first Men in Black movie where all the bugs came out, and that is the Tent of Tomorrow. This was all built by Philip Johnson, one of the leading architects of the day. And when I did go back there last summer, I was very happy to see that they're trying to preserve the towers because they were a mess. They were really crumbling. So I'm very happy to see that. That is the Hall of Science at the time, a period shot, and what it looks like today with the wonderful Hall of Science Museum there, which they added on to. I had to include a couple of more images of fabulous architecture. That is the Travelers Insurance umbrella it was meant to be, because that is the corporate logo of Travelers Insurance, but everybody mistook it for a clamshell. It just looks much more like a clamshell than an umbrella to me. And there, of course, is another Eero Saarinen project, the IBM Selectric Ball. The Selectric typewriter had just been introduced. So that is why Saarinen chose to do that. Although they did feature this new thing called the computer inside. People didn't understand what it was at all. Okay, and there is the newly built Shea Stadium. I would go to see the struggling Mets in the early 60s, but it was a wonderful, wonderful time for me. Okay, we're into the mid 60s at this point when everything changes again. LBJ passes an act, the Hart-Celler Act, which has been also called the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965. Now, until then, because of another law, the 1924 National Origins Act, many different groups from around the world were not allowed to come to the United States. Okay, so LBJ famously opens what he says is the golden door to groups, and these are whites from Southern and Eastern Europe, non-whites, Asians, and a lot of them come to Queens because it's cheap, because of family connections, or because of jobs. Now, at the time, African Americans are very concerned that this huge influx of white ethnics from Europe will hurt the fight for equal rights, which is going on at the very same time. And discrimination in employment, education, housing is still very prevalent in Queens and the rest of the United States in the 60s. And there we see LBJ. He's at the base of the Statue of Liberty. You can see the skyline of Manhattan back there. And on the right, he is actually signing the act. I guess Lady Bird is looking over, and that's Hubert Humphrey, I believe, on the left. And I think we have RFK on the right. Okay, so this really begins a huge transformation in terms of diversity. It continues through the 70s as other new groups look to Queens to resettle. The Russians are coming, if you will. They're fleeing the communist oppression in the 70s. Puerto Ricans and Dominicans arrive in great numbers. They are relocating to Astoria, Woodside, and Jackson Heights. Primarily, we have Israelis coming. They resettle mostly along Queens Boulevard. And of course, we have Chinese and Koreans coming, and they are buying property actively in Flushing at this point. And this wave of diversity happens at the same time as we're transitioning from this theory of the melting pot, where we're all sort of melting down and assimilating into one culture, into something much different, which is called cultural pluralism, which means we celebrate and bring out our racial or ethnic identity instead of assimilating and trying to making it go away through the melting pot. So that is happening at the same time. Okay. Chapter 4, we're into the 80s now. There are troubled economies in Latin and South America, so we're having folks from Mexico, Colombia come in very big numbers. Some of them are coming legally, some are coming illegally as well. We have Soviet or Georgian Jews coming to Forest Hills and Rego Park at this time as well. I talk in my book a little bit about teenagers who came over and are struggling with their identity because they're somewhat based in the old world identity, and yet they're in America, they're in New York City, and they're trying to negotiate their identity between old world and new world. It's an interesting story. And we have many more Koreans and Chinese coming to the Flushing area as well. And a lot of the longtime residents, the first wave of immigrants, the Jews, the Irish, and Germans, decide at this point that they're going to go somewhere else. So you're seeing an exit in Flushing of those groups. Now, the 1990 census is very important because this has been happening now for 20, 30 years, but this is at the point where scholars, academics, because of census data, take note of what's going on in Queens, because they're looking at the numbers and they can't believe it. And it is officially determined by these scholars to be the most multicultural area of the world. So not just the United States. So there we have it. The number 7 is deservedly called the International Express because it runs through many different neighborhoods with the groups that I just talked about. And in that same data, the 1990 census, Elmhurst is cited as the most diverse neighborhood in America. There's sort of a battle going on between Elmhurst and Jackson Heights through all these years, which is more diverse. Elmhurst is at this point. And Manhattanites discover Queens, finally. They discovered Brooklyn Heights and Park Slope in the 60s, and they're going, wow, there are some deals to be had. And so we're seeing a lot of Manhattanites buying up real estate and raising the prices of real estate because of that in Queens at this point. So there we have the number 7 train. I had to include an image of it. I insisted to my publisher that it be on the cover because it's so important. I think it's just a metaphor of a symbol of the diversity. And there you see the route that it takes from Manhattan through the northern part of the borough. Okay. So here we have, I just wanted to show you some sort of before and after shots. And this is, I believe, Forest Hills on the left from the 1920s. It's a classic Garden City apartment that I talked about with covenants, barring Blacks, Jews, and Catholics. And there we have a contemporary image, so you can just see what has changed in 100 years. That is Flushing on the left from around 1970, and a more contemporary image of Flushing today. And here we have, let's see, that is Elmhurst, a few very classic Elmhurst-looking houses. These look just like the opening shot of All in the Family. Although that was shot actually on Cooper Avenue for you trivia buffs in Glendale. It was not in Elmhurst. They tracked it down. And there you see Elmhurst today. So I don't think Archie Bunker would be very happy with the Elmhurst of today. Okay, my last chapter brings the story right up today. Of course, we have 9/11. There's a backlash against Arab Americans and Muslims, and some people start asking, have we pushed multiculturalism gone too far? There are some very ugly billboards going up in Queens. Some of you might remember that. In 2006 into 2008, we have the subprime mortgage mess, which hits Queens very hard. A lot of those folks were targeted by unscrupulous mortgage people and bankers, and so they lose their home in a big way. The foreclosure rate is much higher among minorities and lower income people. 2017 to 2021, there's Trump anti-immigrant rhetoric that is sparking tensions in the area, the hate crimes going on against Hindus in South Ozone Park, and undocumented in Queens feared deportation. Of course, we have COVID from 2020 to 2023. It's very bad in Queens. I don't have to tell you that. And beginning in 2024, again, we have anti-immigrant policies being a major threat in Queens because of the demographics. Okay, so just to sort of wrap up, development of Queens is not over. It's pretty much over horizontally because at this point you have to knock something down if you're going to put anything there, but it is going up quite literally. Okay, so development is occurring vertically at this point, and you have a very beautiful view of the East River in Manhattan, and real estate brokers and agents are leveraging that. So Queens is a big part of what is called the super tall construction boom. It's a global phenomenon. It's just not in Queens, but it is happening in Queens. And there's a debate going on. It's controversial. Is it good or bad for Queens? And supporters are saying, hey, we need it. If we're going to grow and have more people here, it has to go up, and it'll drive the economy. So it's good, they're saying. While critics, and there's quite a few of them, are saying it's not good. It compromises the livability and sustainability of the borough. It really isn't a human scale. They're just way too big. It's contrary. They stick out to an older neighborhood because, they're shiny glass blue buildings. They tend to block the light and the views, and they're very economically divisive. You know, these are luxury buildings. If you're going to spend millions of dollars to put these up, you want the units to be expensive. So you're bringing in a lot of rich folks and displacing people who are not so wealthy, and just plain ugly. So people are just calling these buildings ugly, so they don't like it at that level as well. And I just wanted to show, this is a 1928 ad for what was the tallest building at the time in the borough. It's the Bank of Manhattan Company. This was considered a skyscraper at the time. It was huge. And it was a big deal at the time. There was even a postcard that people would send because it was such a big, beautiful building. But here's what we have today. This is the tallest building on the left. That is the Orchard in Long Island City, which is 69 stories. Which is 5 times as tall as the building that I just showed you, the Bank of Manhattan. And there we have on the right, that is the Skyline Tower, built in 2021 in Long Island City as well, which is 67 stories. Okay, there we have the Astoria in Astoria. That is the Sven in Astoria, which is 64 floors. And then 4th place goes to the Lumen, also in Long Island City, which is 66 floors. That is One Court Square, built in Long Island City, built way back in 1990 with 50 floors. And there, that was the tallest building at the time when it was built. It's been eclipsed, of course. And there is Tower 28, which is the newest building, also in Long Island City, which is 57 floors. That was completed, topped out in 2017. So I just want to wrap up with this image. This is Willets Point in the 1920s. This is the famous Valley of Ashes in Fitzgerald's book, The Great Gatsby from 1925. And there we have what will be, that is a depiction of the new Willets Point that's going up right now. There's going to be a soccer stadium. It's mixed use. There's residential, there's hotel, they're building a school. So I just thought this would be a good way to show how much Queens has changed over the past century. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Larry. That was such an informative presentation. It was wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Any questions from people?
Yeah, so we do have a few comments and questions, and I encourage everybody, this is a great opportunity to ask questions. Feel free to type them in the chat. So Barbara writes a comment. She says, my mother remembers a cross burning on a neighbor's lawn, but it wasn't in Queens, it was in New Jersey, maybe the 1920s. So
yes. Yeah, there were quite a few on Long Island. Long Island had a very active chapter, and they would actually come over to Queens quite a bit. It was more from Long Island, but they would come over and burn crosses. They would terrorize a lot of folks. They would throw rocks in windows when a black family would move in to try to drive them out, and they would actually set some houses on fire. I tell all these stories in my book. It's the ugliest part of the story.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's really scary. We also have several questions from Leah. And Leah says, it's clear that you've done a tremendous amount of research for this book. First question, it's a 3-part question. So she says, first question, where do you start with such a big project? What are some of your go-to archival resources? The second question is, how do you decide what information to include and what to leave out? And the third question, do you have any techniques you use to make so much data into something engaging for the reader? I could always repeat it if you know.
No, this is, these are all very good questions. It's really not just about this project. It's about, any of my projects. I've written a lot of books, and I first start with, has my book, first of all, I get a calling to write this book. It's not like I want to write it. It's like there isn't a book about this topic. that I think has been published. So I feel like I've got to take this project on. So again, there's been a lot of books about Queens, but I really didn't think they told a story that I wanted to tell. So first I have to see that is the book written, so I look on Amazon and I Google it and I make sure, because a lot of times I find that the book or something very close to it has been written. So that kills the project right off, because there won't be any market if I write the same book. The sources, I'm a huge fan of the New York Public Library. I used to have to go to archives and museums and actually, wear the gloves and have a librarian take out the boxes, and you're not allowed to touch the materials. Now, almost all of it is online. I'm using sources from the 20th century, and a lot of it is all online now, which makes it easier for me. Okay. But I'm very interested. I look at scholarly sources on JSTOR, if you're familiar with that, which is wonderful. But I'm very much into journalists who are covering the beat of a particular place, because I really truly believe that reporters, journalists, are writing the first draft of history. So I'm reading tons of newspapers, and I especially am attracted to the Black newspapers. There are about 15 newspapers around the country that are targeted to an African-American audience, like New York Amsterdam News, Chicago Defender, et cetera, et cetera. And those are hugely rich information sources, because they will tell stories that the white media and the white mainstream press will not tell. So they inform a book project in a way that it couldn't be if I just, followed the New York Times, okay? In terms of the information, I don't know. I can just tell, I get a feeling when I read something, whether or not it's going to be in the book. I just feel like, this is interesting and exciting to me, and I feel like it's adding to the narrative. Okay, I have to go back to, okay, what's my story? Does this add to the narrative in a way? Okay, that's the litmus test that I use, and I just gut feeling. There's no way to quantify that. In terms of techniques, all I can tell you is you have to write every day. For me, I write 2 pages on average a day, including research. So it may not sound like a lot, but if you do the math, in 6 months, if you do write every day, and I write Christmas, New Year's, I don't care, you have a book, because, that's 360 pages, with research built into that. So I write very quickly, but I'm very disciplined. That's all the techniques I can tell you. Thank you for that.
And we do have a lot of more questions in the chat, so that's really good. And I did want to ask you, so Queens is the most diverse place on Earth. What are some of the runner-up cities that are also there, but not quite as diverse as Queens?
Right. Well, there are other parts of New York City, of course, that are very diverse that I didn't get into. Brooklyn and the Bronx, and even parts of Manhattan. But there are parts of Los Angeles which are close, and of course parts of Texas on the border. They might actually have a higher percentage of ethnics, but in terms of the spread of the different groups of ethnics, they're less diverse. I don't know how to explain that. They're mostly, like in Texas and LA, they're Latin or South American. They're from Mexico and from Latin and South America, whereas Queens is unique in that it's attracting people from all around the world, from Africa and Asia and Europe, and Australia. Don't want to leave Australia. So Queens is unique in a way that it's pulling people from the world that very diverse places are not. They're concentrated in a particular ethnicity, mostly of Latin origin.
Thank you. And I guess I'll read a couple of comments. Right now we have Barbara is writing again. She writes, who wants more people here? Strains on parking, traffic, and what about the sewage? So I don't know what you have to say about that.
Well, look, I agree with that. Miami, where I spend most of my time, has been invaded by by people from the north during COVID and after COVID. So the traffic here is terrible. So I know what you're talking about. But if you don't attract new people, your place will die eventually. People will die off over the years. You have to bring in new families and new people and new jobs if the place is going to continue to exist. So you might say it's, you know, it's a necessary evil that more people have to come if a community or a place is going to survive. That's just the truth.
Okay, and Linda Fisher asks, how do you anticipate the city of Yes will affect Queens?
How do I anticipate what was
The
the
city of how do you anticipate city of Yes will affect Queens?
city of
Why?
yes? What? I don't know what that is. City of what?
YES.
YES. I don't know what
Yes.
I
I'm not too sure. Maybe that's a typo. So we
I
could
don't know
always
what,
come back to that.
yeah. All I know is yes is how I watch my Yankee games. I don't know I don't know what yes is.
So Linda, could you just come back? Could you type back the question for me, please? And we also have Justine saying, I grew up in Flushing in the 1960s and 70s, nothing like what it's known as now. I wish I could go back in time.
Yeah.
So that's a comment. And then we have from Jonathan. Jonathan says, can you talk about the significance of the integration of the boroughs into Greater NYC 1910, was it? And also the story my dad used to tell me about Nassau voting not to join and people there feeling they escaped.
I'm not familiar with this subject. If he can elucidate and tell me a little bit more. And again, my book starts really in 1920, so I don't know too much about 1910. But if you're talking about the integration, like the busing and stuff like that, we can talk about that. But I'm not exactly sure what John is asking.
Oh, and we also have a Debbie saying, just an FYI, this van is in Long Island City in Queens Plaza, not in Astoria.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right, then we have Jackie. Jackie says, I'm saying St. Albert's RC in Elmhurst claimed 34 ethnic groups among their parishioners some years ago. I love local history.
Good. Yeah. By the way, if you want local history, you know, Arcadia Books, the History Press is wonderful. They've published a couple of my books, not this one, but you know, they will dig deep into a particular neighborhood like Astoria or St. Albans and find wonderful vintage photos. So those are great sources for that.
Okay. So I guess you kind of indirectly answered Barbara's question. She says, your stories are very interesting. Love this session. Thank you both and QPL. So where to get your book?
All your favorite booksellers. You know, I prefer real brick and mortar stores, you know, but Amazon has it, Barnes and Noble has it. You know, it's out there. It was published by SUNY Press, by the way, State University of Press. So thank you for that. And it's available. It's online. You might find it at a bookstore on the shelf. You may not. They may have to order it.
Thank you. And I guess a few people chimed in about City of Yes, and I guess it refers to a major multi-part zoning reform initiative in New York City, spearheaded by Mayor Eric Adams. So I guess maybe you'll talk about that in your next book.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know about that. I spend part of my time in New York, but I'm mostly in Miami, so I don't know too much about what's happened in the last few years. That's
Guy,
all very political, and I don't follow that.
the guy writes in the chat, I live in Long Island City, and one of the very tall buildings, what most people don't know is that many of these buildings have apartments dedicated to affordable housing.
Okay, that's great to hear. I didn't know that. Thank you.
Okay, and then we have Barbara saying she grew up in Sunnyside in the 1940s, went to the 3940 World's Fair many times. It's a wonderful experience. And the most, so we have more comments. It's a rezone. Oh, so more comments explaining what the yes is, that it's a rezoning that's been passed by the city council.
Yeah,
Um,
I can't speak to zoning.
So, so then we have another question from Justine asking, who defines affordable housing? Affordable for who?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sure the city has all kinds of criteria for that based on income and net worth. I'm sure they divide that up very closely. I'm sure there's a number. I don't know what it is, but the city keeps track of that very closely because it'll determine a lot of who, who gets where, what kind of buildings get built, etc.
Okay, so I have a question in
Yeah.
terms of you said you traced the borough's history starting in the 1920s. Why is that decade the pivotal starting point for modern Queens?
That's a good question. And I start almost all my books in the 1920s, believe it or not. First of all, you have 100 years, which is nice. It's just sort of catchy to look at the last century. But I think everything changes after World War I because modernism sweeps over the country. Everything has changed after World War I. And of course, we have the Roaring '20s and the economy boosting. So it's just a great starting point. And you're seeing, because of the economy, a land boom. And here in Miami, we have it as well in the 1920s. And in LA, we have it. And in New York, we have it. On Long Island, we have it. In the 1920s, people are making a lot of money and they want to buy houses. So you're seeing the suburbs develop. So it's very much tied to the stock market and to the economy, which is how real estate develops.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And in your research, did you find that diversity was an intentional goal, or was it just an accident?
It was an accident. I mean, I knew Queens was diverse in some ways, but I had no clue until I started writing really and reading the number of groups that have come there and how it happened and why it happened, because there were always reasons for why people left their countries. It was either political or economic, almost always, or to join family members. So I was as surprised as anybody, as I am often by my books, until you get into the research and start reading everything. You really don't know what you're going to find. It's like a novelist who doesn't know what I've spoken to novelists about this because I only write nonfiction. I'm like, how do you write fiction? And they're like, well, I don't know what my characters are doing. They kind of take on lives of their own and they do things that surprise me. And I'm like, you write it. You have to know. And they're like, no. Once a character develops, they kind of do things. They are writing the book, of course, but authors are often surprised about where their stories go to. So I was very struck by this. I had no idea about all the people that came, or that the National Geographic did this DNA test. I had to learn that.
So
Thank you. Is there go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, is there a forgotten neighborhood in Queens that you feel best represents the borough's soul?
That's a very good question. I'd have to say Jamaica, because it's, it was early on developed and it became a prime area for African Americans, and it still is today. So I feel like that's the heart really of the borough. That's sort of the symbol of the diversity, because that happened very early on, even before I start my book in the 20s, in the 19th century. And some academics are pushing back and finding that there was a Black community there way back, to the revolutionary times, to the colonial times. So I found that very fascinating. So I think that's, if I had to pick one, I would choose Jamaica personally. I think it's the most interesting neighborhood.
Oh, thank you.
And Simone, I was going to ask that question.
No, really?
No, it's all good. So, What can the rest of the U.S. learn from the Queen's model of coexistence?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, it's that people from all around the world who speak 800 different languages can pretty much get along. You know, there have been parts, ugly chapters in its history, and they pop up now and then for different reasons. But for the most part, it's an incredible place. And that was my secondary objective, to try to give Queen some respect. And it's like, this is a microcosm of the world. Which doesn't exist anywhere else, and we should, recognize that as truly unique. I think if somebody in Topeka, Kansas, who who was concerned about diversity, read this book, and you can see how we all share DNA, and can mostly get along.
In writing this book, were there any facts that sort of surprised you, that said, wow, I mean, I didn't see that coming?
Right. Well, I didn't know about the African American real estate thing that was going on in the 20s. I didn't realize that Blacks were buying homes, and there were real estate people, agents and brokers, who were making a living by marketing to that audience. And actually, there were developers, builders, who were building for that market. That was great. And I've actually extracted that part of the book into articles, and which have been published sort of separately, because there's sort of like a distinct part of the story that nobody knew about. So I was very struck by that. I think it is my favorite part of the book. It's only about 5 pages, but it's a really good story, just that little nugget.
Somebody asked. Oh,
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to read the comment in the chat saying, sorry, are you the Jonathan Landsman who works for New York Times? Quite a while ago, we gave you a child's seat for after our son was done with it. If you are that same person. This is Jonathan Lawrence.
I'm not Jonathan Landsman. Maybe there's a Jonathan Landsman out there, but I'm certainly not him. But and I don't write for the New York Times, unfortunately. It sounds like a good gig, but I do not.
Oh, wait a minute. I think this is a conversation in the chat.
Yeah, because there was a John before, so it must be directed to him.
Yeah. And then he answers, I am not probably, I'm reading a kind of personal conversation.
Okay. Oh, we cleared that up.
Thanks.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is after 7, and I guess we're gonna start winding down. Now that you've charted its history, what is your trend forecast for the next 50 years of Queens?
Wow. Well, it is going to get taller, whether we like it or not, because that's just the future of Queens and most places. Here in Miami, we're having a lot of super tall buildings, construction going up and obscuring views. I don't like it, but it is what it is. You can't stop it. So that's going to happen. And I don't know. I just see the diversity continuing. I don't see why it would stop. So I think it's going to continue along its trajectory for the next 50 or 100 years. And it'll still probably be the most diverse place on earth, if I can predict, in 2125, in 100 years. I don't see why anything slowing it down. People are still coming.
Okay. So this concludes our wonderful author's talk. Lawrence, thank you so much for joining us. And I am so happy that everything worked out really, really well.
Yeah, the technology worked this time. Thank you.
Oh, yes. And we had a fabulous audience. Almost the same as our last session. Casper normally closes with a very interesting question. So Casper, take it away.
Yes. So Larry, when are they going to make the movie based on your book? And can you and Simone be in the movie? We are in Queens already, so it's convenient.
Right. You know, I didn't mention this, but the biggest problem I had in writing this book, if you like do a keyword search with Queens, which I did, you're going to get stuff that has nothing to do with your borough. You're going
Wow.
to get mostly about European, queens, people who are married to kings, and some other stuff. So that was the biggest obstacle. So I don't think there's going to be a movie based on this queens, but I want to be in.
There should be.
There should be. Yeah, I mean, people are making documentaries about covering the same area with that diversity. So there are documentaries being made.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so much, Larry. Thank you so much, Simone. And for everybody tuning in, happy holidays and happy new year. Literary Thursdays will be taking a break for the next 2 weeks. I think there's going to be Christmas and New Year's, and we'll be back on January 8th from 6 to 7 p.m. virtually. And we're going to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebration with Gloria J. Brown Marshall, author of A Protest History of the United States. So stay tuned for that. And thanks again, Larry. It was great having you.
Okay, that sounds good. I'm going to go to that.
Thank you. You're most
Thank
welcome.
you. Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you so much.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you so much
Take
for
care.
joining us. Be
Thank
safe.
you. Good night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.